It's one of the most polarizing issues in this country. What to do with the thousands of people, many of them children, coming across the border illegally. A lot of them end up here in our local communities.
Investigative reporter Stephen Stock spent 2 months traveling from the Mexican border to the home of refugees here in the Bay Area. And tonight, he takes us behind the scenes. Stephen.
Jessica, the federal government's own statistics show this has become a humanitarian crisis. Just in the last fiscal year alone, 250,000 people who are not from Mexico have been picked up by the U.S. Border Patrol along the Mexican border. But rather than being deported or locked up, many of those same people are being dropped off by federal agents at local bus stations and re-released into communities across the United States, where they now live in the shadows.
The night that I left from Honduras, I was abused by that guys. They raped me.
Raped and threatened with her life.
I feel that they will kill us, everybody.
This 19-year-old still fears for her safety, so we'll call her Sophia. She hides her face, but she wants you to hear her story of escape and survival from death squads in her Honduran hometown.
They started to beat up my father a lot, and then they placed the gun over my baby's head.
They were members of Mata 18, one of the most violent gangs in Honduras and the world. Come to their home to collect extortion money from her family.
We can't pay anymore because my father has no job to pay it.
Entraron violentamente, a mí me golpearon.
Sophia's father asked to be called Roberto.
Y violaron a mi esposa y a mi hija. Eso fue lo más duro que me pasó en mi vida.
After Roberto's wife and daughter were raped, his life threatened, he and his family fled Honduras, unsure of their future.
Un amigo muy cercano a nuestra familia, pues a él lo decapitaron en dos.
But sure, he would die like his friend and neighbor if he stayed.
Las personas que no lo han hecho no saben qué terrible es.
That's why they now live in the shadows. The entire family, 5 people plus 1 infant, staying in this one small room here in the Bay Area. And this family is not alone. According to the U.S. Border Patrol, more than 68,000 families have been apprehended crossing the southwest border with Mexico so far this fiscal year, compared to about 15,000 families last year, an increase of 361%. That corresponds to a spike in gangs, violence, and lawlessness in Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, the 3 countries where the majority of these refugees come from.
I ended up doing several 1,000 hearings.
Tom Haynes served both as an assistant U.S. attorney prosecuting immigration and as an immigration defense attorney before retiring as a Border Patrol attorney this past July.
The immigration policies in the United States tries to accommodate 2 inconsistent ideas. One is, we are a country that provides refuge for people who are suffering persecution. The immigration law is also designed to protect the homeland.
The numbers of people fleeing Central America have become so large there's no room in court or in holding facilities. So after picking the refugees up along the border, federal agents re-release them back into the U.S. if the immigrants have relatives already living here who can pay for a bus ticket. In exchange, these refugees agree to report to local immigration authorities once they get to their relative's hometown.
The President is very committed to taking executive action to fix our broken immigration system.
While admitting the current system is broken, Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson insists the numbers of these refugees peaked back in June and have now declined to levels last seen in January 2013.
The bottom line of all this is, in recent years, the total number of those who attempt to cross our southwest border has declined dramatically.
Even so, the sheer number of these refugees dropped off at local bus stations created a crisis, overwhelming local resources.
In the last 6 months, it's been thousands of individuals.
Teresa Cavendish serves as Director of Operations at Catholic Community Services in Tucson, Arizona, one town particularly hard hit by the number of refugees being dropped off at the bus station.
They are leaving, in most cases, truly desperate situations, and they are making the kind of choices that I might make in their situations.
I only see the people who make it.
The demand for resources grew so intense that Catholic Community Services hired Galen Hunt, an AmeriCorps worker whose job is to do nothing but house, clothe, and care for the people dropped off by ICE agents at the bus station. As many as 40 refugees a day.
Many of them were dehydrated, they were hungry, Clothes were torn and dirty, and
Over the course of several days, the investigative unit documented family after family arriving at this bus station in Tucson. Young mothers and their children, even a father and a young daughter traveling alone. We talked with many of them. All of them feared for their lives.
They rolled the dice to come here.
We also rode the bus with several of these immigrants, headed to places like Atlanta, Los Angeles, New Jersey, even Eureka in Northern California.
If you stay there, you will be killed, and that's why we are here.
Sophia and her family also rode the bus for 3 long days just to get here to the Bay Area.
We're here because we are saving our lives.
Now Sophia and her mother make the trip to San Francisco to report in to immigration authorities once every 2 weeks, honoring the agreement they made in order to get that bus ticket to the Bay Area.
Sí, tenemos gran miedo.
They may be scared, but they admit they feel safer here than back home, if not entirely secure. Because for them, a judge issuing a deportation order back to Honduras would be issuing them a death sentence.
Just say, get back, he's killing us.
Siento que seríamos unos cadáveres ambulantes en un avión viajando hasta nuestra propia muerte.
Now, as we mentioned, these aren't the only people who are living among us in the shadows. We've talked to dozens of people who are directly involved in this immigration and refugee crisis. Over the next several weeks, we will introduce you to some of them, including those who recently fled here to the Bay Area alone because they are children.
And many
they
of
are
them
still alone.
And harrowing stories for those children
Unbelievable.
as well.
Yep, came here alone. It's that bad.
It's complex and emotional. Thank
It really
you, Stephen.
is.
There's no easy way out, especially for the children. Their situation is so dire in their homeland, they flee to America without their parents. Many of them end up here in the Bay Area.
Tonight, we hear from those refugee children. Investigative reporter Stephen Stock went undercover and continues our series of reports of real refugees living in the shadows around us.
We spent 2 months traveling between the Mexican border and the Bay Area, joining immigrants on buses headed for destinations all over the country, including here. Along the way, we also discovered something we did not expect to find, something about many of these refugees that startled even us. The large numbers may have dwindled in the last few months, but the lines of refugees making their way to local bus stations have not stopped here in Tucson, Arizona. We watched as day after day, mothers and infants, fathers and young children were dropped off at the local bus station. They all were fleeing violent gangs and death squads in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. Then we rode with some of them across hundreds of miles of desert as they traveled to meet relatives and friends already living here throughout the United States, traveling to far-off places like Atlanta, New Jersey, Los Angeles, and Eureka in Northern California. Along the way, we discovered an unexpected group of refugees.
Sí, tengo miedo.
Yes, I'm scared.
Among them, this refugee from Guatemala who fears for his life even now. That's why we won't show you his face, and we will call him Jaime.
Me salí en Guatemala por muchos problemas con los pandillas.
I got out of Guatemala because of problems with the gangs. They were following me, wanting to kill me. I didn't want to die. I wanted to save my life.
The gangs in Guatemala came for Jaime when he was 12. Shortly after that, he fled for his life, leaving his mother, his home, his country.
Si regresa, seguramente la muerte estoy esperando.
If I return to Guatemala, for sure, death will be waiting for me.
Jaime is now in school and in hiding in plain sight among us here in the Bay Area. Except for a distant relative whom he barely knows, he is alone. Jaime is 14. Was it worth it to come here?
Sí. Valió la pena.
If I didn't have this now, I'd be dead today.
No pude seguir ahí y me vine yo sola.
I couldn't be there anymore, so I came alone.
This girl, whom we will call Dariana, fled her home in Honduras alone after she witnessed a friend shot to death in the head.
Hay unos que solo...
There are some that just look at little girls, spying on them so that they can kidnap them and rape them. That's what they do over there. They sequester them and rape them. they prostitute them out, and if not, they just kill them. Their bodies appear everywhere, in rivers, anywhere.
Dariana was 13.
Me sentí muy mal.
I felt so bad. I was alone and had no one until I got to the detention center. I didn't get to talk to my mother. I didn't know how she was.
Ella no sabía cómo estaba.
These children are not alone. According to the U.S. Border Patrol, almost 52,000 unaccompanied children from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador have been picked up along the U.S.-Mexican border through September 30th of this year. That does not count children coming here with parents. It's just children traveling alone, a number that has more than doubled, up 149% from last year.
There is a deportation proceeding that is commenced against illegal migrants, including children.
Earlier this year on Meet the Press, Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson, while insisting federal law would be followed, also admitted these refugee children pose a unique challenge to immigration policy in its current form.
We are looking at ways to create additional options for dealing with the children, in particular, consistent with our laws and our values.
At least 2 a day.
2 walk-in refugees each day who come here to the East Bay Sanctuary in Berkeley, where Sister Maureen Dugnan serves as executive director.
Many of the children know that their parents are here somewhere and they're looking for them.
Supported by several local Protestant and Catholic churches, East Bay Sanctuary has given legal help to at least 65 unaccompanied minors just since June.
It's a crisis for them because if they don't have representation, legal representation, they'll probably be deported.
The idea of welcoming refugees, welcoming strangers, that's part of who we are.
Reverend Ben Daniel is pastor at Montclair Presbyterian Church in Oakland, one of the local churches that supports East Bay Sanctuary.
I get frustrated when I hear people suggesting that children risking their lives to come here, 12 years old, 8 years old, whatever, these people, to say that these people are some sort of existential threat to the United States, that frustrates me.
They said, if you join us, we'll be friendly and things will be like we have said.
This girl was 17 when she fled her home in Guatemala after gangs told her to join them or die.
But if not, they told us they'd kill us. That's why we came here, to save our lives.
Jaime is now in high school trying to learn English and hoping he can stay. He worries that gang members from Guatemala will catch up with him even here. Dariana made her way to the Bay Area where she was finally reunited with her mother and father who were already here. They worry about the family's matriarch who still lives in Honduras, and they say Shirley will be killed if gangs find out that they talk to us. The plight of all these children has ignited a national movement among some churches, a movement started here in the East Bay. Coming up later this month, we will take you inside that movement and show you exactly how it's spreading beyond the Bay Area to the entire country as we continue to examine this immigration crisis.
So what happens when they arrive here in the Bay Area? Among the thousands of undocumented immigrants from Central America, many come here and go to church.
Local churches are doing what they did 40 years ago, sheltering immigrants. Investigative reporter Stephen Stock takes us behind the scenes of a movement that started here in the Bay Area, Stephen.
That's exactly right. It's called the Sanctuary Movement, and it first began here and in Tucson, Arizona, more than 40 years ago, as you mentioned. Now the Sanctuary Movement has reignited once again. It's already spreading across the country to places like Los Angeles, Portland, Chicago, Denver, even New York City. The home video shows an 11-year-old eldest son, Gerardo Grijalva Jr., hitting a home run in Little League,
Good job.
pitching, even taking practice swings with his dad throwing soft toss. But this isn't your typical American story. You see, Gerardo's mother, Rosa Robles Loreto, now faces deportation and separation from her family. For 15 years, Rosa and her family lived, worked, and paid taxes in Tucson, Arizona. That is until a sheriff's deputy pulled Rosa over for a traffic violation and realized she was here illegally. Rosa and her family agreed to sit down and talk with us.
After fighting the court with my attorney, my deportation letter arrived.
After 2 months in immigration detention, the federal government ordered Rosa deported, potentially separating her from her husband and 2 sons.
It is something I fear. If they say no, you have to go. I won't tolerate being without my children.
That's why Rosa Robles Loreto now lives here, in this small room at Southside Presbyterian Church in Tucson, where she and the congregation now defy the deportation order. While her family can come and go and live elsewhere, Rosa stays here in sanctuary, away from what the leaders of this church say are unjust, unfair, and broken U.S. immigration policies.
You have people of faith who are standing up saying, we're not going to fail to act in this time.
Allison Harrington serves as pastor at Southside Presbyterian, a congregation that has served as sanctuary to hundreds of undocumented immigrants for decades.
This isn't just about Rosa. This is about the thousands and thousands of families who are living in fear of being separated by our broken immigration system right now.
We're moving. This sanctuary movement spreading nationwide now actually dates back to the 1980s and the Civil War in El Salvador. Before that, to the Vietnam War, when this church in Tucson joined 2 other churches in Oakland and Berkeley.
The Reagan administration and the INS were saying that to harbor an illegal alien would be a felony.
Marilyn Chilcott and her husband Bob McKenzie were both once pastors at St. John's Presbyterian Church in Berkeley, and 2 of the founders of the movement to provide sanctuary for refugees from the Civil War in El Salvador in the 1980s.
What you were doing was the right thing to do.
So I'm glad to see that the congregations have once again claimed this.
This year alone, according to the U.S. Border Patrol, 250,000 people, such as this young mother, have fled death and rape squads in Central America. Both this mother and her mother were raped in front of her father. The entire family fled Honduras for their lives.
I want to save my baby's life, and my dad wants to save our lives. Dejamos todo abandonado.
We abandoned our belongings, all of it thrown everywhere.
So the family sought sanctuary at a Bay Area church and remain in hiding, living among us in the shadows.
Nosotros como familia sí estamos de acuerdo.
As a family, we all agree. We'll go to the church to avoid going back to Honduras.
Sí, tenemos gran miedo.
Yes, we're very scared.
There are mothers pushing their kids across a river. It's not the Nile in Egypt, it's the Rio Grande here.
Reverend Max Lynn is now pastor at St. John's Presbyterian Church.
What would we do if Moses floats up to us in a basket? What are we going to do?
Reverend Ben Daniel serves as pastor at Montclair Presbyterian Church in Oakland, another founding church in the sanctuary movement, which is once again providing refuge to a family.
I couldn't live with myself if I didn't do everything I could to save the lives of the family that has been given to us for care.
Both Lynn and Daniel say their congregations are willing and able to stand up to the government if authorities try to deport these refugees.
If they say that no, they're just illegal aliens, then we're willing to harbor, to find a safe haven, to protect them from deportation.
It's an issue that divides many Americans. Some opponents say there's no room for a movement like Sanctuary in the current debate over immigration policy.
And they are breaking the law.
Gabriela Salcedo Mercer emigrated from Mexico in the 1980s. She ran unsuccessfully for Congress in the Tucson area, both in 2012 and again in 2014.
When churches or any other organization take this approach of, we are going to become the heroes by protecting this lawless behavior, I'm sorry, but they're wrong.
We're not going to stand by and watch moms and dads being taken from their kids. It's just as simple as that.
Sanctuary movement supporters say the current reality of 250,000 refugees fleeing just El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala leaves them with no choice.
Are we going to push them back across the river? Are we going to murder them? Are we going to hate them? Or are we going to embrace a child whose mother was so desperate that she sent them across the river?
No, I don't want to be the kind of human being that would send someone back to die.
Now, President Obama's executive order issued just last week does not necessarily mean the end of sanctuary. In fact, experts tell us that while Rosa Robles Loreto may actually be able to leave under the president's new order, the other families in sanctuary, including those you saw that are taking sanctuary here in the Bay Area, are not covered by the president's order and will likely remain hidden in the shadows. If you would like to see all of the stories that we've been doing on the immigration crisis, along with maps and other resources, just go to our website, NBCBayArea.com.